The Braver Little Tailor. Once upon a time, in a quaint village surrounded by rolling green hills, there lived a young tailor named Thomas. He was poor but cheerful, spending his days sewing clothes and dreaming of adventure. One sunny morning, as he stitched a bright patch onto a customer's cloak, he gazed out the small window of his tiny workshop. He longed for a life bigger than the one he knew, unaware that his wish was about to come true. This little tailor's journey was about to begin. As Thomas prepared a modest breakfast of bread and jam, an annoying swarm of flies buzzed around his table. He tried waving them away, but they returned, more persistent than ever. Frustrated, he grabbed a cloth and swung it with all his might, striking 7 flies dead in a single blow. Marveling at his quick reflexes, he chuckled and said, "7 in one stroke." Proud of his feat, he stitched the words onto a sash and decided to set out into the world to make his mark. Thomas packed his needle, thread, and scissors into a small bundle, tied it to a stick, and set off down the dusty road. With his sash declaring 7 in one blow, he felt invincible. Villagers stared at him curiously as he walked past, whispering about his mysterious achievement. Let them wonder, he thought with a grin. Thomas was determined to prove himself and seek adventure beyond the humble walls of his home. As the day turned into evening, Thomas stumbled upon a sleeping giant resting near a towering oak tree. Not one to miss an opportunity to show his bravery, Thomas stood tall before the massive figure. When the giant awoke, Thomas proudly pointed to his sash. 7 in one blow, he declared. The giant, mistaking the tailor's boast for defeating 7 warriors, was impressed and decided to test Thomas's strength. To prove his might, the giant squeezed a large stone until water trickled out. "Can you do this?" he asked with a booming laugh. Clever Thomas picked up a piece of cheese from his bundle, pretending it was a stone, and squeezed until milk dripped out. Surprised, the giant threw a heavy rock into the air, challenging Thomas to throw it higher. Quick-witted, Thomas released a small bird he had in his pocket, watching as it soared out of sight. The giant, baffled by Thomas's cunning, admitted defeat and invited him to spend the night in his cave. That evening, Thomas lay awake, sensing the giant might try to harm him out of jealousy. True to his suspicion, the giant struck Thomas's bed with a massive club, but Thomas had cleverly slipped out and slept elsewhere. In the morning, Thomas smiled as the giant awoke to find him unharmed, sealing his reputation as a fearless and clever adventurer. Thomas soon arrived at a magnificent kingdom, its castle gleaming atop a hill. The townsfolk were abuzz with talk of 2 terrifying giants causing havoc in the nearby forest. Spotting Thomas's sash, they assumed he was a mighty warrior and led him to the king. The king, desperate to rid his land of the giants, offered Thomas gold and his daughter's hand in marriage if he succeeded. Thomas ventured into the dark, twisted forest, where the 2 giants roared and bellowed as they argued over stolen treasures. Thomas crept closer, using his wit to devise a plan. He climbed a tree and began hurling rocks, causing the giants to blame each other. Their argument turned into a fierce fight, and soon they had defeated each other, leaving the forest silent once more. Triumphant, Thomas returned to the castle with news of the giants' downfall. The king, though skeptical, was overjoyed and announced Thomas as the kingdom's hero. The princess, hearing of Thomas's cleverness, began to see him not as a common tailor but as someone extraordinary. Yet, the court murmured doubts, plotting to test Thomas further. The king's advisors challenged Thomas to capture a wild boar that had been terrorizing the kingdom. Armed with only his wits and a rope, Thomas entered the forest. He set a clever trap, luring the beast into a sturdy snare. The boar thrashed and growled, but Thomas remained calm, bringing it back alive to the astonished royal court. The princess, intrigued by Thomas, began to spend time with him, asking about his adventures. Thomas shared his tales, embellishing them with humor and charm. She admired his courage and wit, and for the first time, Thomas felt that his dream of proving himself was within reach. Jealous nobles whispered among themselves, determined to expose Thomas as a fraud. They convinced the king to assign Thomas an impossible task, to capture the unicorn that roamed the enchanted glade. Thomas, undaunted, accepted the challenge. Thomas crafted a plan using his tailor's tools. He scattered ribbons and glittering thread near the unicorn's favorite spot. When the creature approached, fascinated by the shimmering objects, Thomas gently looped a rope around its neck. The unicorn, sensing no harm, allowed Thomas to lead it back to the castle. The king marveled at Thomas's success but couldn't help but wonder if the tailor's bravery was pure luck. To settle his doubts, he decided to assign one final task: to rid the kingdom of a dragon that had been spotted in the mountains. Thomas climbed the rocky mountains, his heart pounding as he approached the dragon's cave. Smoke billowed from its entrance, and the ground trembled with the creature's roar. Yet Thomas didn't waver. He used his cleverness to devise a trap with a heavy boulder and sharp stakes. When the dragon emerged, Thomas triggered his trap, wounding the beast. Using his quick thinking, he tricked the dragon into chasing him, leading it into a deep pit where it became trapped. Exhausted but victorious, Thomas returned to the castle as a true hero. The kingdom erupted in celebration upon Thomas's return with news of the dragon's defeat. The streets were adorned with banners, and the townsfolk cheered as their hero passed by. The king declared a grand feast in Thomas's honor, where nobles, villagers, and even the princess sang praises of his bravery. Thomas, however, remained humble, savoring the recognition but knowing his true strength lay in his wit and determination. As the feast continued, the princess approached Thomas, her eyes shining with admiration. She confessed how impressed she was with his courage, resourcefulness, and kindness. Thomas, taken aback, smiled and shared that his adventures had taught him the value of cleverness and a brave heart. Their bond deepened as they spoke, and the princess began to see a future with the tailor as her equal. Though the kingdom celebrated, the jealous nobles couldn't accept Thomas's success. They conspired to scare him off by claiming he had to defend the castle from an imaginary enemy, an army of sorcerers. When Thomas learned of this, he decided to teach them a lesson. He calmly set up harmless traps around the castle, using colorful banners and loud instruments to make it seem like an army was retreating after being outsmarted. When the king investigated the supposed attack, he discovered the nobles' deceit. Furious at their jealousy, he banished them from court. The king turned to Thomas and apologized for doubting him, declaring that no further tests would be required. The court erupted in applause, and the people's admiration for Thomas grew even stronger. True to his promise, the king offered Thomas his daughter's hand in marriage and a place in the royal family. Though overwhelmed, Thomas accepted, realizing his journey had led him to the life he had always dreamed of. The wedding was a grand affair, with villagers and nobles alike celebrating the union of the clever tailor and the kind-hearted princess. Thomas, now prince of the kingdom, ruled alongside the princess with wisdom and compassion. He used his experiences to teach others the importance of bravery, wit, and humility. His sash, once boasting 7 in one blow, hung proudly in the royal hall, a reminder of the tailor who dared to dream big. And so, Thomas's story became a legend, inspiring countless generations to believe in the power of cleverness and courage.